We started in the United States, but have since then expanded to Canada, UK, Singapore, Australia, UAE, and India itself. So we do lots of programming online, including the Climate Summit. We do a healthcare series and many other sessions that are open to the diaspora and Indians at large. Indiaspora also has a major presence on social media, so do follow us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and other sources. Indiaspora's newsletter, also something you may want to get, keeps you informed about all the news in the diaspora in India on a weekly basis. And Indiaspora just concluded a few weeks ago a major global forum in Bengaluru, where we released a report on how the Indian diaspora has made an impact on India, and also what the diaspora can do in partnership with India and what it can do in the next 20 years when India attains Viksit Bharat. So that's the kind of overarching role that India plays. Indiaspora plays is to be a force for good, whether it's in a country that we live in or if it relates to India itself. Again, today's summit, Climate Summit, is going to focus on AI, because this is the one topic that everybody in the world is talking about for the past few years. And so what we are here to answer is AI a positive force for climate action, or is it going to be a drain on our resources? And that's why we've got a very diverse set of speakers, starting with people in politics, policy, academia, business, startups, technology, NGOs, and a wide range of people to come, not just to discuss, but we also want to get concrete answers and solutions that our audience can take away. Again, as we refer to, can AI be a positive force? Obviously, AI today is draining a lot of resources, especially energy, land, water, and so forth, as more and more data centers are created around the world. And so the question is, what can AI do to help this situation? I think we wish we had our dear friend Vinod Khosla with Khosla Ventures as a speaker. He has written a very extensive blog and has also done a keynote, a video TED keynote that we'll be posting in the chat box that you can look at, where he talks about 12 critical things that AI can do to help with climate action, including improving materials, improving cement, steel, and many other products, along with AI being used for autonomous driving, public transit, so on and so forth. So please do take a look at that in terms of where the potential of AI can help climate action as we know it. Our first keynote speaker is my dear friend. I was sent his bio. I'm not going to read his whole bio because it would take several minutes to do so, but Suresh Prabhuji is a dear friend. He's in India as we speak. He's a statesman, a diplomat. He's also a chartered accountant. And he's had significant cabinet portfolios in the Indian government, including environment and forests, power, railways, commerce and industry, civil aviation, chemicals, and fertilizers. He was also the G7 Sherpa and the G20 Sherpa. Shows the prominent role he's played in India as a global leader. He also has been a 4-time Lok Sabha parliamentarian and also been in the Rajya Sabha. I don't know what Suresh Prabhuji hasn't done, but I know one thing, that he is very interested in climate action. And without further ado, I want to invite my dear friend, Mr. Suresh Prabhu, to really deliver his keynote remarks. Welcome.
Thank you, my dear friend. Let me first of all congratulate Mr. Rangaswamy for doing something so spectacular and so relevant and so useful for so many years. And he set up this organization, Indiaspora, which has now spread wings all over the world. And it has been playing a role of... Hello? Yes.
Yes.
He's playing a very important role in shaping public policy, bringing together all the stakeholders, linking intellectual capital to financial capital, making sure that India develops, but also along with that, the world also benefits. And that's why I think this is a very important forum. Let me congratulate him for coming out with such a brilliant idea of today discussing about AI and climate action. I don't think there could have been a very better convergence of such two important issues. And really, I thank Mr. Rangaswamy for being so innovative to come out to think like this to begin with. Now, let me just tell you something. Climate is the most important issue because there is nothing, war can destroy a lot. If the nuclear war can destroy probably everybody, but climate change, and it is a reality which will destroy not only human life, but probably the entire biological life. So it is as dangerous, as potent, as worrying as nuclear weapon, but even far more than that. And this will be something which will affect everybody. Nuclear, if you put a nuclear bomb somewhere, it might happen locally. Climate is going to affect everybody in all parts of the world, in different measures, of course, but everybody is going to suffer from climate change, already suffering from climate change. Now, to do that, as you correctly pointed out, he's not talking about now origin of climate change, reason of climate change, why it happens, but he's going into climate action. So let us look at it like this. This climate change is affecting because of greenhouse gas emission. That is proven by all the scientists of the world, so there is no reason to go into that. It is also proved that it is because of human action, which causes greenhouse gas emission, which in turn causes climate change. Now, what does AI can do? Now, one action, one part of the story is climate is a threat. Other part of the lot of fear about AI is that it can actually destroy jobs. It can disrupt the existing way that we do business, we live life. That's true. But at the same time, there could be a positivity from AI, and that positivity can be actually one area in which it can be profoundly used is in climate action. Why? One, I was a minister of power. Mr. Rangaswamy was very generous when he said I had 10, 11 cabinet positions over the last 30 years and almost equal number of years in the parliament. Actually, one of the things I had done was Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee's cabinet when I was there, I introduced energy efficiency law, which has actually improved energy efficiency in India. Energy intensity has gone down, and energy is one of the principal reasons why the greenhouse gas emission happens if it comes from fossil fuel family or hydrocarbon family. So just imagine energy efficiency can be hugely used through AI because AI will know. AI is a database tool that we know historically what is happening, where it is happening, and can provide simple solutions to energy efficiency. And as Mr. Rangaswamy correctly pointed out, industries like cement and steel and others, they are energy guzzlers, where processes can be properly tracked and you can actually come out with solutions which will result into lesser emissions with similar production. It will not affect economy, but it will actually benefit economy because you are using less power is good for your cost of production. So it's good for your own business, but also good for the society. So this is one area in which it can be very easily used and can be done very effectively. I know I have limited time, so I'm just not going to too much. But second area, agriculture. Now, when I'm talked about just this energy use, etc., that's from the point of view of reduction of emission, which is what we call is mitigation. But there is other aspect of climate action, and more importantly, for a developing country like India, is adaptation. In adaptation, one of the principal area where the adaptation has to happen is in the area of agriculture. So just imagine agriculture, we can use water using proper use of water using AI. We can use cropping pattern using AI. We can think about making sure that post-harvesting, where the losses take place significantly in India, we can work AI. We can use AI for the purpose of understanding the pricing models in the market, and therefore the farmer can sell it at the right price. So this can be a major adaptation tool AI can become in agriculture. AI can be used very effectively for many other applications in, say, for example in mitigation. One part, an adaptation, other part, which I was just speaking. In adaptation, one of the result of climate change is going to be natural disasters, which are already happening. The US is not immune to this, or no part of the world is away from it. So just imagine if you use AI. So one is a predictive to understand where probably natural disasters could happen, taking the weather data, taking all other available natural flow data, and also in terms of if at all natural disasters are going to hit, like it always hits Florida, Texas, and other states in US, can we actually work on model of how can the quick response takes place? Disaster response. The FEMA is there. Of course, FEMA is not getting enough money, Mr. Rangaswamy, from the budget. But just imagine that we can actually come out with tools which can actually help people to address this issue in a very significant way. Now, you go to infrastructure, which is another issue of climate change. We put up unnecessarily huge buildings without having proper sunlight, no air, and then we put false ceiling by putting first top ceiling to make sure it looks better. AI can actually help in designing houses in a much better way, because housing, incidentally, is one of the principal emitter as well. You cannot believe it, because lighting and other areas in which the construction material that goes into the building, so all of that can be, the entire life cycle of construction activity can be properly looked into. Infrastructure planning can be done in a significant way. Energy, which is in fact, we cannot live without energy, as we are saying today, because of Hormuz Strait being blocked. But just imagine that we can actually look at entire life cycle of energy, right from exploration to production to its transportation. All of these can be addressed very effectively through AI. And I think this is a topic on which I am so much interested. I had set up a think tank called CEW when I was founding chairman, because I really believe, and then of course I'm a founder of Shakti. I'm also board of CSTP, which are all of the not-profit think tanks, but which work on these issues very effectively. I think, Mr. Ramaswamy, I would have loved to talk even longer, but I know there are very eminent panelists will be already there on this. They'll add a lot of value to this. And I'm also supposed to be flying out. But I can tell you something. I think this is a fantastic idea. How can AI be used as an insurance cover, as an interventionist tool to look at climate action? It's a brilliant idea. And I think we should really take it forward. And there is no better person than Mr. Rangaswamy who can do it in a manner that he'll not just talk about it, but will act on it. Like climate is another issue in which people talk a lot, but no action. And therefore, climate action is the right word. I think Rangaswamy is the right person who is a climate warrior, you can call him, but I would call him as a multi-purpose warrior. He can fight any war, but not the type of war that is being fought today in the world. But he fights war for good causes to mitigate the challenges that the world is facing, and also make sure that we live in a much better world than what we are living today, through bringing in top brains of the world through Indiaspora, to bring in ideas and link ideas to action. And that's why I really congratulate you, Mr. Rangaswamy. Thank you very much for giving me this great honor and opportunity to be a keynote speaker for such an important issue. I'm sure I will see you soon in Bay Area when I'm there in next week. So congratulations, all the best.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prabhu. It is wonderful to have you with us. We now move on to our panel discussion on deploying AI for climate. At a time when the climate crisis demands urgency and innovation, AI offers new ways to understand, predict, and respond to environmental challenges. It's also about governance, access, and impact. This panel will explore what meaningful deployment really looks like. Our session chair is David White, Director, Advocacy and Communications at CDRI. David has been living in New Delhi since 2019, working at the British High Commission, and since 2023 with the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, an international organization founded by the Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi, which now has 65 members. Over to you, David.
Rita, thank you very much. And thank you to Indiaspora for pulling together this excellent program today and inviting me to be part of it. We have an awful lot to get through in just 35 minutes. I have an excellent panel. I'm joined by Ranjan, Shalu, and Mohit. The organizers have kindly agreed to put their full biographies in the chat so we can save time and move straight on with our discussion. And I'm going to come first to Shalu, because I think Rohit hasn't quite joined us yet. So Shalu, I'll come to you first, if I may. What will determine whether the growth of India's AI and data center capacity strengthens the country's climate trajectory? Over to you.
Thank you so much, David. And first of all, thank you to the Indiaspora team, MR, Amita, Shri, Sanjeev for hosting this very timely conversation. And it was wonderful to have Mr. Prabhu, who also happens to be founding trustee of CEW, and he set the vision, very aptly, of various pro-climate use cases that AI can further. And I think that is, in brief, the short answer to the question as to how the growth of AI and data center can actually strengthen India's climate trajectory. And I would take an opportunity to give a very concrete example on this front. Ms. Prabhu talked about the climate extremes that are hitting India, which happens to be 7th most vulnerable country to climate extremes in the world. And floods, droughts, cyclones, their intensity is rising year after year. We've been tracking them. We can't stop them, so we must prepare for them. And here, at CW, we built an agentic climate data platform that makes climate information accessible to anyone and everyone. And the idea is that users can use climate intelligence on a query mode to understand, what kind of long-term climate risks, be those increase in temperature or sudden events like floods or heat waves, are going to hit which parts of the country at a very granular level, from state to district to ward. And that can then enable a better decision-making and preparedness, and help direct investments in the right parts of the country. So that's one example. In fact, we've used such data and intelligence to actually help 100+ cities and districts in India already to prepare heat action plans, identify high risk wards, as well as identify locally suitable thresholds for early warning for heat waves. Now, this is one such concrete example where, in absence of potentially AI, developing such plans would have taken at least a decade at such a scale. And we are now going to be partnering with multiple organizations to take it to as many cities and districts as possible. Now, that's one example, but there's a flip side, because using AI, using more and more data also means that we will have to develop data centers, and India is already seeing a lot of growth on that front. The data center capacity has almost tripled in the last 5 years, and it's set to quadruple in the next another 4 or 5 years. And these are resource intensive. And because we are starting out, there's not as much chatter around its resource intensity as compared to, say, US. Data centers together account for 0.5% of our electricity demand and say 0.02% of our water use annually. But as they grow fast, resource footprint will grow as well, and therefore the need for right policy frameworks and right guardrails on regulations will be very important to ensure that we leverage AI for the right purposes and do so with minimal impact on resources and environment. Thank you.
Great. Some really good examples of the wonderful work that I think we all know that CEW is doing across India and internationally. From a policy perspective, where do you see the biggest gaps right now?
So this is based on a recent assessment we did. We looked at the policy framework at the national level as well as across Indian states. We studied the policies for data centers set by 15 Indian states, and we find that broadly the current policy framework is attuned to attracting investments rather than setting rights, checks, and balances. And of the 15 policies we examined, only 5 had some sort of sustainability provisions, and these were also, more guiding in nature rather than mandatory. So, a few gaps that currently stand out that will need to be soon filled include: one, lack of any mandates on data disclosures as to what kind of energy, water are these data centers going to be using. Lack of standards as to what benchmark should they aspire for. So for instance, if we look at water, which is a growing concern around data centers, we don't have provisions on, whether a data center should use, recycled water for cooling, or, they should avoid water stressed clusters or cities. So those are the gaps that will need to be filled. And similarly on power, there's a lot of opportunity to use clean power that is maybe happening in voluntary fashion, but we could consider bringing in more directions to guide, right kind of investments, and so that, data centers also drive sustainability, goals in the country rather than, being in tussle with them. So I'll put it that way. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Ranjan, good morning. I'll come to you next, if I may. Where are you seeing the most credible use cases for deploying AI for climate in India today?
Thank you, David, for having me. This is Ranjan. I work for a company called Tech Mahindra, part of Mahindra & Mahindra Group. We have been sustainably nurturing the AI use cases for climate. But I'll give you a different perspective when it comes to how we see the usage of AI when it comes to climate. I'll take a few examples. Look at the telecom industry, like 65% of the capex goes into the networks, and networks consume a lot of power and compute. With AI coming in play, we put it in two parts. One is AI in networks and networks in AI. For example, how you can use AI to make your networks more leaner, make your enterprise more leaner, and also how do you build your next generation network capabilities and use AI within your network to make sure there is a efficiency, and you bring inferencing closer to where the AI will be used. So we see a huge amount of use cases when it comes to power consumption of these networks. For example, how you can optimally utilize the power, how you can switch off certain time of the network when they are not operating. Secondly, how you can build better capacity into the networks just to make sure that these are optimally used. Data centers consuming a lot of power. I think Shalu did mention, alluded to that point, but now the usage of the data centers using FinOps with cloud as a great driver, how we can ensure that we can build some controls and use those limitations in the compute more. Payload, I think some of the areas, like we are empowering our development community with more AI tools so that they can do the whole software development lifecycle in a more optimal way, because there is, end of the day, you need to consume the resources in terms of how you utilize these tools, how you generate less amount of waste, use the optimum storage, harness some of the capacity, do some predictive algorithms to make sure that you have make the data usage wisely. So we are part of the AI mission for India, Tech Mahindra, and we are responsible to build frugal AI for the community. For example, our Indus LLM model, which is a 6 billion parameter, initially built on a CPU with Intel, but later we deployed onto a GPU. So we can see that there are mechanisms to build AI at scale, but using the right kind of architecture. And when you see globally, there are two set of points which are emerging. One coming from China, which is more like open source AI architecture, which is very kind of open. You can build a lot of use cases faster. And then there are some vertical stacks coming from the NVIDIA, which is, let's say, they define as a 5-layer cake, right? With starts with the infrastructure to compute to GPU and to applications and data. So India would go a bit of a hybrid in a way to make sure that we use the best tech in the ecosystem, but also give more centralize the usage of AI, make it more cost efficient. So that the use cases, whether it is education, healthcare, telecom, I talked about, or agriculture, they can make best use of the compute infrastructure. So the shared compute, more grid infrastructure where you can capitalize on the existing data centers, make them AI enabled, interconnect with them with AI grid. So NVIDIA has launched the AI grid, for example, which kind of brings the capability within the country. You don't need to build necessarily big AI data centers like being built in the Middle East or in the US. You can kind of enhance the capacity of what we have today and make the better usage of it, David.
Great, thank you. And I really like your focus on critical, using AI to support critical systems like education, healthcare, telecoms, and agriculture. Just to come back one more time, what do you see as the most important system level enablers which is needed across India to make AI useful for climate at scale?
Yes, so I've talked about the 5-layered cake. I think each of these are equally important from a system point of view. Like I'll take few examples. Let's say from enablement of AI, we need training at scale. We need innovation centers which can bring the foundations and multimodals tailored to Indian needs, right? So we don't want to replicate what has been done again, so that there is a common set of principles, common architecture. Secondly, the data sets. Very important point is when you want to scale AI across different walks of life, especially in the community, then you write model for your data sets, which is more about how we improve the data quality, how you can use some of the guardrails around data. So that has to be thought through from day one, because the sensitivity of the data, which is where the AI adoption will not scale for the right areas. And then support more on the priority area structures. Many a times the corporates may not necessarily focus on agriculture, education. If you see, AI benefits are more in the tech sector. The tech sectors are enjoying building more productivity, but when it comes to other sectors, they are lagging. So we need more focus, more investments around that, so that not just from the climate point of view, but then there is a whole productivity angle we can bring. And second, last but not least, is the kind of talent pool, right? The skilling and AI labs to bring future skills. Skills is a big challenge. I think when we sitting in a software industry, we tend to see that we end up spending almost a year more in training the new joinees onto newer skills, because the infrastructure is lacking. If you go to any of the, apart from the IITs and the regional colleges and some of the private schools, most of the tech schools, they lack the AI infrastructure. They may not have a GPU lab to train on skills like CUDA to make sure that they can optimize some of the use cases. So there is a level of enablement which is required in the system to make sure that we can scale, and not just at application level, which is predominantly we see the high skill growth, but also at every layer, including infrastructure, GPU as layers as well.
Great, thank you very much. Mohit, I'll come to you now if I may. After the hugely successful AI summit in New Delhi recently, lots of discussions on data centers being developed in India. Do you see India becoming a leader of adoption in AI first? And then also, do you see India housing big AI data centers going forwards? Over to you.
Thanks, David, and thanks, Amita and Mr. Rangaswamy at Indiaspora for having me here. And happy to connect with Shalu and Ranjan also on this call once again. Yes, the AI Summit was in many ways a kind of a path-breaking event, which led to a lot of things being discussed and multiple sets of commitments, and from practically all the large AI agencies across the world. So, and as Prabhu Ranjan mentioned, I see no reason why India, with the kind of demography we have, with the kind of market we have, cannot be the leader. And the focus of the government also has been to ensure that a lot of use cases for AI, and which have been covered by Ranjan and Shalu as well, are ultimately used more and more for creating a DPI, the digital public infrastructure, so that it actually benefits all. And it should be across the board. So whether it's for fintech or education, I could actually talk a lot about how it's also being already deployed in the past sector. That's my background, so I know a little bit of that. But I have seen that in many cases, the use of AI, and it has kind of seeped in, very organically. You never realize that now you're actually using AI machine behind whatever is happening. So yes, India definitely can be a leader. And more importantly, the focus of the government is also to create the data centers to house, to operate these AIs. And we've had multiple announcements over the last couple of months, and many of these are all in gigawatt scale. So what we are seeing today is that the deployment of AI, ensuring that the data stays in the country and is used. And this has become more and more important now, that with the kind of volatility we see across the geopolitical situation we see across the world, India is able to actually operate these things and will be able to operate these things without any disruption. So I'm quite certain that AI as well as AI data centers India will be one of the leaders. And in fact, I think I saw a report a couple of, I think last week sometime, which very clearly stated that outside of US and probably China, which I'm not sure what the kind of numbers are, India is the only country which will probably have the largest number or largest data center capacity.
That's great. Thank you very much. You mentioned your expertise in the power sector, and I know that AI is increasingly being used in different ways. What do you think are the most important and innovative ways we're seeing AI used in the power sector across India?
Maybe a couple of things, and I think probably I'll also like to add how India is uniquely positioned. And this is not necessarily the use of power sector. And this was a discussion I also heard yesterday in the other session, where there's a lot of discussion about how, whether it's positive for the planet and so on and so forth. You see, India is uniquely positioned. I mean, if you compare to US, for example, and there was a chart in one of the sessions, I remember, that the transmission connectivity in US is almost like 10 years, which is kind of unheard of in India. So India that way actually provides a very good opportunity. And India also provides a very good opportunity because India is endowed with excellent renewable resources. And coupled with the battery prices, India could actually be the leader in green data centers. So the sustainability question of powering AI data centers, which are guzzlers, as we all discussed earlier, are guzzlers. So it becomes much easier. So we are actually taking out one of the most important challenges in terms of how to run the AI data centers, which is to convert it fully to green. And there have been multiple set of auctions conducted by various agencies in the country, and we see in fact, in India, the cost of running data center is probably the most economical if you use round-the-clock renewable power. Because as compared to any other fossil source, and I'm sometimes surprised that many US and other countries talk of gas as green, which obviously we do not consider. So green is green. I mean, when you're actually not using any of the fossil fuels. So for me, green means using solar and wind or hydro backed up by the long duration storage, which can actually power a data center. So now, when we do these kind of configurations, and this is where I'll try to link it to the use of AI, a simple thermal power plant, for example, is relatively easier to dispatch. I'm not saying very easy, it's relatively easier to dispatch because India has become a large grid. There are many changes, ups and downs. You need to increase your capacity, you need to decrease your capacity. With renewable power, it becomes all the more complicated because you're actually managing 3 sources in many cases, or at least 2. So there is a power generation source like solar or wind, and then there is a long duration storage. And you need to seamlessly integrate. And I have been associated with a couple of renewable companies who have actually set up a very, very high level AI based control center for dispatching the power seamlessly so that you actually don't have any kind of disruption. and to ensure that the power is available as per the demand. So these are generally known as controllable or dispatchable powers. And these are very typical use cases, and these would not be possible. I mean, for people who have been linked to the power sector, how an exchange operates, how the power sector operates, the decisions are taken in nanoseconds and milliseconds. So it's very important that we are able to optimize the case, and AI is probably the best case scenario. It's also very important that one of the very typical things in power sector is demand forecasting, because with renewable energy, it becomes very, very important that you're able to forecast demand. And AI has been able to increase the accuracy. I'm not saying it's 100% now, but definitely from where we were like at 90%, we could actually see that it's happening closer to 96, 97%, which is not only a positive for the grid as a whole, it's also actually positive for the power supplier, because otherwise that fellow loses money through various regulations. So these are two very large use cases. And of course, to add to what Rajan said, there have been typical examples of using AI now more and more I have seen in creating learning models, which are real time, which could actually train our people to work in the power sector. Over to you, David.
Great, thank you very much. Everyone has kept remarkably to time, so thank you very much, because it gives us an opportunity to take a question from the audience. And Aresha has asked, how can we ensure AI for climate action remains equitable and doesn't widen the gap between developed and developing regions? Now, you've all, to some extent, touched on this in terms of the need for sustainability, to focus on communities, frugal AI, the need to develop DPI. So maybe I'll come to you in the same order. And if you'd like to take maybe a minute, 2 minutes to address Suresh's question, that would be great. So Shalu, over to you first.
Right. I mean, both are great questions and may not have, very direct answers. I think these are the challenges that we'll have to, constantly be watching for and, evolve our policies and approaches. I mean, I think that'll be the meta response to this question. But in my view, it's not just about widening inequity between developed or developing countries, but also within countries, right? There are possibilities of that happening as well. So it's really about, I think, what are we putting the AI to use for, and how are we making accessible and cheap for population at the population scale. And at least here, the approach that India is taking in terms of integrating local languages with domestic LLMs, thinking about edge level inferencing so that we can reduce the amount of computing needed and therefore the resources needed for it, and integrate and making it a more domestic approach to it, rather than just going with the models that are being developed in a different context for different reasons, is the way how other developing countries could also ensure that they're leveraging AI for their own purposes, rather than just trying to catch up with the race. And also perhaps we need to put in place some more governance mechanisms that are tracking what are the implications of AI, and are the benefits actually translating beyond the promises being made. And that's sort of the response to your second question, Arisha. That's the only way to know, is there harm being done first, and then how do you develop mechanisms to compensate for it and prevent future harm. Right now, we are in such a nascent journey that it's impossible to put governance mechanisms into place, and shouldn't be too hard, otherwise we will kill the innovation. So, and I hope that across various levels of governance, with participation of local community members and different kinds of user segments, we should be able to avoid perceived harm, and given the pace at which this technology is evolving.
Great, thank you. And I think your focus on multi-language models, or models able to input and provide data from multiple language sources, is really important and perhaps not discussed enough at events like this. So thank you for bringing that up. Rajan, over to you.
Yeah, so I'll give you a very real example. When Sam Altman visited India four years back, and our CEO CP Gurnani and he told that India cannot build a LLM model from scratch, and we took a challenge and we built it in less than 400K Indus model, which has 250 Indian dialects, and we didn't even knew those dialects, and we did it through open source, and we created the very frugal stack and rolled that out, and it is one of the most downloadable, top 10 downloadable model on Hugging Face. So what that tells you the story that the AI is available for everyone. It is more open source than we think. What is lacking is the entrepreneurs. We are now gifted to have so many entrepreneurs who are doing so many beautiful things in AI. So AI, there are no roadblocks. It's not like enriching uranium, which is more controlled between the West and the developing countries. Recently, India enriched thorium to deliver the similar power requirement. So there is an innovation at heart in the developing world, where they know that the resources are scarce, but they can scale faster. Secondly, we are always pressed against time. While the AI has evolved in the last 10 years, so developing countries would have very less time to scale. But then there is a lot of work which is now accessible. The beauty of AI is it is equitable, which is brilliant. It is more about now how do you contextualize it for your own usage in your own country? How do you use it more? Use the learnings from the West as well as China, right? That's the beauty. You don't need to repeat the same mistakes. Make it more have a robust governance from day one. Use sustainability at the heart of planning a power. Use very well-defined KPIs. Have the measurements in the corporates from adoption. So there's a lot we can do, and I think I don't see that as a great barrier. It is more about time. I think we are already seeing huge amount of progress when it comes to AI in the developing world, especially India is taking it boldly and making a lot of strides.
Great, thank you. That's a really good example. If Mr. Ottman thinks there's things India can't do, then he probably needs to spend more time here. Mohit, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. I think if you look at it in a very simple manner, see, if you want to make it equitable, ultimately it boils down to the cost. So I know this is not something we or I can advise to people like NVIDIA and say how to bring the cost down of a data center or the AI processing. But the fact remains, today in India, for example, the government has focused it on DPI, and which is important. One very simple example of how this can be taken further has been in the case of power sector. So I'm sure all of the people sitting in the room are aware of how India actually rolled out the United Payments Interface, UPI, and it has become probably the most equitable and inclusive mechanism for financial inclusion. Similar attempts are underway in the case of United Energy Interface, and I know probably Shalu is much better placed to talk about that, but that is something which is using AI as the backbone to allow use or transfer or sale of power in real time, and that probably would not be possible if we do not have AI. So there are multiple set of examples, but the fact remains that if we have to look at equity, I think I tend to agree with Ranjan that AI is organically equitable. I mean, you don't actually need to do it. So the most ubiquitous thing is when you open your search bar and the first thing you see is AI mode, and Google is literally forcing everyone to go down the AI road. So it's not as if it's not there. It's right there staring in your face whenever you open your laptop or mobile or whatever. On the other question of AI-driven climate decisions, and this I feel kind of jilts back into what I said, that India, for example, is uniquely placed to actually create the greenest data centers, the greenest powering of the AI. So in case of India, and I like to thank Amita for saying love the belief in India. So I totally agree that we are actually quite uniquely positioned. So if at the root level or at the very, very basic level, we are not taking it, we are taking a decision. I'm sorry, we are taking a decision which is not dependent on climate. We're actually taking climate out of the question. Then it automatically doesn't it's a kind of a fail-safe. It already has a backstop there. So I don't see why, in case of India or green data centers, for example, this should be a challenge.
Great, thank you very much. One of the great things about Indiaspora is it's not just a growing network around the world. They don't just organize great events, but they're trying to drive positive change. So looking forwards, I'm going to ask our three experts for 2 to 3 practical actions which could be taken in India over the next 1 to 2 to 3 years to ensure that AI supports India's climate goals. And I'm going to go in reverse order, and I'm going to come to Mohit first. So Mohit, a minute or two, 2 or 3 really practical short-term actions that India can take.
So thank you, David, for actually putting me in the spotlight here. And yes, I think part of that was already answered by Shalu when she said that a lot of policy enablers which need to be taken care of. And probably one of the things which government has already done and probably needs to push even further is to ensure that a lot of these development of AI in the country is largely focused on DPI. It doesn't mean that the organizations do not do it for various other activities. I'm sure they're doing and using it in multiple set of, whether it's for organizational use or for large scale compute. But what is also happening is, what is also required is that we ensure, and that is something which we at IECC have very clearly suggested to the government, is that when the government does come out with a national data center policy, which I believe they're in the process of, or almost in the process of finalizing, one of the key elements should be that it should be based on green. So all the incentives which do flow into that should be largely dependent on whether or not the people are using green power for doing all their compute. So that's very important because sustainability has been at the core of what we have been doing, and the government has been very clear. So whether you talk about a target of 500 gigawatts renewables by 2030, or as per our initial work into looking at how it should be at by 2035. So we see a very clear case that AI could be one of the largest consumers of green power in the country. So I'd probably push at these 2 things to ensure that the data centers or the AI use is largely, or at least over 95% dependent on the use of green, and the focus on DPI so that inclusion happens. Thank you.
Great. Using AI to drive the green revolution even further and support DPI. 2 very positive, tangible recommendations. Thank you. Rajan, I'll come to you next, if I may.
Yeah, so I think I would focus on 2 aspects. On in how do we reduce the training cost of the models, right? So which would mean that the whole procurement around and the regulations around building data centers, procuring chips of multitudes of architecture. Today, you can have not just have NVIDIA, but also have the Google chips, or the Cisco's, AMDs of the world building some chips, or even China is building advanced AI chips. So procurement part of the infrastructure to be more seamless, the cost not to be just borne by the corporates, but the government can do significant things, treat it like more like a national kind of infrastructure, enable the training part, inferencing part, obviously how we make it more cheaper, because once we make the training cheaper, the inferencing can be beneficial. And building, incentivizing the telecom companies in India, whether it is Jio, BSNL, or Airtel, to be more incentivized to kind of bring a lot of GPU compute in the inferencing places, because they are best controlled to do that, given the landscape in India. And plan it ahead then becomes an afterthought. So those are the 2 things, because end of the day, if the AI is not affordable for the enterprises, they will experiment, but it will not, the adoption won't be at scale, is how I see it, David.
Absolutely. It needs to be affordable, and the workforce needs to be there and trained to use it. Thank you very much. Shalu, over to you. The last word, your recommendations for the next 2 years in India.
Yeah, I would focus on 3 specific actions. One, that the policy that Mohit referred to on data centers in India, I think it should have clear provisions for transparency, disclosures of what resources are being used, and then accordingly thresholds that will guide them towards lower water footprints and clean energy use. Second important aspect is of siting, and in place of very project specific siting that is happening at the moment, project to project, we need to move towards integrated water, energy, land nexus based siting, where we can avoid areas that will worsen environmental footprints of these centers wherever they come, and apply some zoning mechanisms there. And thirdly, I would say, complementing what Ranjan mentioned, how do we make local and vernacular information and data available for the training of these large models, which are potentially training on information available in English, and therefore maybe locking in biases, and that's where that inequity between developed and developing countries could come in. And then to correct for that, developing countries need to make available their local data and information and stories and experiences available in languages that other models can train, so that they reflect our realities as well. So I'll pause there. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. For AI to work here, it has to work for India. I'd just like to, we will wrap up here. We've run out of time. We've covered an awful lot in 35 minutes. I'd like to thank my excellent panel, Rajan, Shalu, and Mohit. I'd like to thank the Indiaspora team again for pulling this all together, and I will hand back to them, and best of luck for an excellent rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, David, Shalu, Mohit, and Ranjan. That certainly gives us food for thought. For those joining us late, this is the Indiaspora 6th Annual Climate Summit for the Eastern Hemisphere. We now move on to the next segment, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome Dirisha Kudithipudi, Robert F. McDermott Chair in Engineering and Director of Matrix AI Consortium at UT San Antonio. Dirisha will speak on National Neuromorphic Computing Hub taking on the AI energy crisis. This session will help us rethink how we build and power the next generation of AI systems. Dirisha.
Thank you for that warm introduction. I'm trying to share my screen here, so just give me a moment. Unlike most of you, I'm actually in the Western time zone. My trip to India got changed in the last minute, so thank you so much for accommodating the changes in the time. I think the last panel has given a great backdrop to what I'm going to talk about today. So there is a lot of interest in, well, if AI can be a net positive, but for this planet. But I think one of the things that I'm going to focus on in my talk today is, what is this fabric behind the AI? The fundamental substrate on which all of it runs is the compute. And compute, unlike in the past, I think, is no longer a standalone sector. If you think about the hardware and software, or the materials, or the skill set, or the talent pipeline, and all the broader economic impact, all are evolving along some new and uneven innovation curves. And in order to think about democratization or sovereignty strategy for any of these compute technologies, and more so for emerging technologies, I think there needs to be really careful thought. And I've heard some of the ideas earlier, how some of these things can be thought about in developing countries, because it is important that a broad set of users and developers are able to access this compute. And the specific compute I'm going to focus on is called neuromorphic compute. And in order to ensure that there is a large user base and developer base that can access this technology, we have launched the THOR initiative, which is called the Neuromorphic Commons, last year. It is a National Science Foundation funded initiative. So before I go a little bit more into why it is exciting to think about neuromorphic computing in this context, I just want to remind you all a little bit about our brains. things you might have learned in high school biology. I think one of the beautiful things about the brains is that the hardware is inherently not hardwired, as in there is plasticity across all abstractions of our biological brains, all the way from the cortical regions to the neurotransmitters. There is amazing levels of plasticity because of which we are able to learn continually and throughout our lifetime. Faults are indigenous in these systems, and usually parallelism, massive parallelism and redundancy seem to appear to compensate for some of the outputs that are generated from these systems. You're able to learn in real time, which all of us are doing right now. And brains in general are the working exemplar models that we are aware of. And the beauty is that it requires only few resources to compute using biological brains, about 20 to 25 watts in total, but a lot of the cortical computation power is only around 0.1 watts. And if I contrast that to some of the other systems that we are concerned about today, the AI systems, and this data is old actually, I'm comparing it with OpenAI 5 Dota 2 video game, you're consuming hundreds of megawatt hours of energy and then hundreds of millions, and maybe it can run up pretty high there in the training cost for the systems. So there is this elegant solution that biology has given to us. So why not take an inspiration from that? And if we look at some of the discussion that happened earlier in terms of the data center demands, this is from the newest AI index report from Stanford. It really shows that some of the power consumptions are equivalent of that of Switzerland or Austria. So it is unsustainable in any order if you think about this. And obviously, scaling up is not necessarily the solution for most of these cases. Whether it's scaling up that could lead to overutilization of energy resources, that was discussed earlier, or it is scaling up of the models just for the sake of trying to solve more complex problems. That is not sustainable because you require more compute, more memory as you scale up these models. And in general, we're running out of available training resources because of this approach. So there has to be a different mechanism or model or architecture that you need to think about fundamentally so that you are able to design and develop more sustainable solutions. And one such one is the neuromorphic computing, or often also referred to as brain-inspired computing. The idea is that you emulate the biological principles or the plasticity rules that you see in the brains onto silicon or onto algorithms. So the Carver Mead, as you see in this picture, coined this field in 1978 to 79. His original idea was that we are building new types of silicon that is inspired by biology. But the field has evolved, and the idea of neuromorphic computing has become slightly broader today, where lots of researchers are looking at not only the hardware systems, but also the algorithms that are inspired by these biological brains. So can neuromorphic computing solve the AI's energy crisis? At least parts of it, because there is no single solution, there is no easy solution for this problem. You need to really think across the stack in order to come up with a comprehensive solution. So the idea we have here is, apart from as research scientists, we do build new types of neuromorphic systems in our research labs. But the idea we have here with THOR is a lot of research labs do not have access to this infrastructure. They do not know how to program on this infrastructure because this is a very niche skill right now. A handful of scientists across the world are able to program and work with these systems. And a lot of times, development is happening in individual research labs, in academic labs, or in research labs in industry. So it becomes a very challenging task to get access is one, but also to see where the field is in terms of benchmarking the advances in the field. So the idea with THOR is, how about we create this large-scale neuromorphic infrastructure and provide access to all of the community members. So it's not just the physical infrastructure of the neuromorphic computing systems, but also the tools, the frameworks, the models, all of the elements that are needed in order to work with these systems. And a lot of times the tools are underdeveloped, the frameworks are heterogeneous, and a lot of times PhD students develop, they graduate, they go on to industry positions, and the tools fall out of favor. So there are lots of challenges, as with any other emerging field. But as such, the field itself is at an inflection point. We had this paper in Nature a couple of years back. We've been writing about this with a concept introduced during a National Science Foundation workshop. The field has really grown significantly. So it's at an inflection point. You could see the number of neurons. If that is one measure of the growth of the field, we have started at 520 neurons when we built the first perceptron to we have billions of neurons on the most modern systems. So definitely there's an opportunity here to see if we can actually deploy these large-scale AI models onto these kinds of systems, and if there are energy efficiency gains to be had with this. The estimates go anywhere from 30x to 100x savings, depending on the context, depending on the problem we are trying to solve, depending on the data set, and so many other constraints. So our team is really distributed. We have scientists, while I'm the lead investigator, we have scientists at University of Tennessee, Knoxville, San Diego, Harvard, and then we have a growing body of advisory board members who have either built these systems, like Steve Ferber has built one of the larger neuromorphic systems, or Etienne Cummings, who has been building several of these mixed signal systems, and Michael Milford, who uses these in robotic applications, and Terry, who has been very instrumental in the neuro AI community very early on. So we also have several community leaders that are helping us reach out to those individual communities, whether it's the DOE national labs, whether it's universities, or whether it is students, or whether it's application domains. For example, Joe Hayes helps us with the robotics applications. So, and again, this community is also growing. We are in the early stages. So these community members really expand our reach so that more users can start benefiting from this infrastructure. And we are also developing a lot of interfaces in-house. I wouldn't want to go too much into detail. That gives the user more information of what they're running on the systems, what is how the power is being consumed for different types of models, and the percent utilization of these resources on these systems, and so forth. So as I mentioned, the idea is to really engage with the community, democratize access to the technology in a very niche and upcoming field. So one is to give that access itself. The other part is really to advance the field, advance the R&D in this field. And in order to do that, we kind of have these mini grant challenges that we are launching. So the community can work towards solving these grant challenges and measure where we are in terms of progress and what are some of the pain points or bottlenecks in our design cycle or development or deployment cycles. And benchmarking, this is a hot button item in our community. I mean, standards really help us measure where we are in terms of growth. But at the same time, when a technology is in a nascent phase or when it's growing very rapidly, it's very difficult to settle down with a subset of benchmarks, because every community feels that they are not, or every sub-community might feel that their type of data set or benchmark may not be represented in the standards. But what happened is this also has become a community-driven event. So one such community-driven event is the NeuroBench, which is one of our collaborators who's at Harvard, has led this initiative, and we were able to come with some initial set of benchmarks, but we are adding to those benchmarks through the THOR infrastructure now. And there are several other ones that are developed by other communities. So I think the beauty is that the community is naturally identifying what are the right benchmarks to evaluate the effectiveness of these systems. And in terms of talent pipeline and educating the new generation of researchers and scientists, we're also holding competitions and training and lots of hands-on tutorials. So this is our phase 1 system installation. You can see, looks pretty rough in there. But this is a digital neuromorphic system by Spinnaker that we have installed in here. And this was very much in close partnership with the company. We had their scientists come from Germany, help us with the installation, and it's really a collaborative effort. And the second phase is to integrate with our other long-term partner from Heidelberg, who has built this analog system. So we have a digital, and then this one is an analog system, which is called the brain scales. So, so that you can kind of evaluate different types of benchmarks and algorithms on these systems. And in phase 3, which is still quite a bit of a ride in here, because we want to really incorporate the new neuromorphic systems that are coming out of small startups and also independent research labs. And this is where I think the real challenge is in how we are going to build the software framework so that it's easy for the end user to access these different types of systems. So this conversation has begun. And the current support from National Science Foundation really is not thinking about this phase 3, but there are other organizations who are heavily invested and interested in expanding these capabilities. So that's a peak. We had the launch a few months back. So that's what it looks like at our university. And there are various workshop activities and events. And if you're interested, please do reach out. Here is a QR code for our first challenge. This is actually, we started off with a very simple challenge so we can engage a broader community. So, and phase 1 doesn't require access to the infrastructure. So I think more participants can join in phase 1. And there are several other global partners, including we work very closely with IISc Bangalore. They organized the Bangalore Neuromorphic Workshop over the last couple of years. I've been visiting there regularly. And similarly with IIT Hyderabad, some of the more on the algorithm side and so forth. And to someone's point earlier, they were talking about the sovereignty and how developing countries are able to participate in the standards and how there might be some imbalance in terms of access. So in the World Economic Forum, we have a council called the Global Future Council on Next Generation Computing, and I'm representing neuromorphic computing technology. There we are actually talking about these very problems, and we are preparing a white paper, hopefully to be released very soon to the community, to kind of at least think of a framework on what are some of the things to think about with this next generation computing. And if you're interested more in the science of it, this paper in Nature kind of gives why we went to install this THOR infrastructure to begin with. Thanks to multiple of our sponsors that we're able to actually work in this exciting field and hopefully solve some of the energy challenges, both from the compute side and some from the algorithm side as well, by taking inspiration from biological brains. So with that, stop here and thank you so much. I'm open to taking any questions you might have.
Thank you so much for staying up late. First of all, I know you're stateside and it's really late for you, so we appreciate it. There is one question that I wanted to ask you is, in terms of the ethical guardrails, when you're working with something that could have a potential cognitive impact or that's so closely related to human brain functioning, how are you guys thinking about it?
I'm sorry, I did not understand the cognitive impact part.
I guess, when you're working on something that is so similar to anything that's a human component, I suppose, what are some of the thought processes there in terms of guardrails?
Yeah, so just to be clear, we are not really implanting anything in biological brains, right? We are really taking what neuroscientists have understood about the brain, its learning mechanisms, and also its forgetting mechanisms. All of those principles and hypotheses that neuroscientists have developed over a long period of time through experimental data. We work very closely with the neuroscientists as we take that hypothesis and build the mathematical models and algorithms from there, and then get it onto silicon. So there is no actual biological brain as such involved in this. But maybe to answer your question, the other counterpoint to this is the neuroscientists are always saying brains are not necessarily the best inspiration to look at, right? And we shouldn't be limiting ourselves to look at biological brains, but I think that's a starting point, is how I would look at it.
Okay, thank you. So, I mean, it's not like neuromorphic computing is going to replace human minds, but not directly through a connection, but through the way it works. Because if it's working so similarly, it at some point.
I need to clarify. I probably did not clarify when I talked about neuromorphic computing definition. It's really what we are trying to do is emulate the processes in biological brains. We're not mimicking it on silicon. There are some researchers who are mimicking it on silicon, but their purpose is really to understand the brain better. So they have a platform to test their hypothesis without actually needing to induce something into the biological brains. There's a small group of researchers who are exploring that, but most of the research that I've talked about today is emulation, not mimicking.
Oh, perfect. That is, I think, probably giving relief to someone that asked that question. Thank you so much again, Dirisha. I'll pass it on to my colleague, Preeta, who might. Oh, there's one more question. Do you have a minute to take?
Yes.
Can neuromorphic chips realistically replace energy-intensive data center AI, or will they remain complementary?
There are several functions within the data centers that neuromorphic computing systems can already do. Lots of pre-processing, lots of sensing, and some of these front-end operations, I think those can be offloaded to neuromorphic systems. But some of the DOE labs are working on seeing, if you can use neuromorphic computing for scientific compute applications where you need a lot of precision. So if those kind of systems are developed and evolving, then they could take up a bigger portion of the load of the data center in that sense. I would say there is always going to be a heterogeneity of these architectures and compute stack, at least right now. I wouldn't say neuromorphic is going to replace everything. It has its own sets of challenges.
Awesome. Thank you once again, Dirisha. I'll pass it over to Preeta, my colleague.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Dirisha. That was interesting and lots of valuable insights there. As we turn to the role of leadership in driving meaningful climate impact, I would like to introduce you to Deepali Khanna, Head of Asia at the Rockefeller Foundation, joining us from Thailand. Deepali will speak on catalyzing climate action, focusing on philanthropy, capital, and the power of AI. Over to you, Deepali.
Thank you so much, Preeta. And of course, it's very hard to go out with Dirisha, who was just phenomenal. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. I think it was very late for Dirisha. It's an honor to join all of you today as we discuss India's development and growth during a time when the world faces tremendous challenges. Specifically, I want to share a few thoughts that have been on my mind lately, and I'm sure it's been on many other people's mind, rooted in India's philosophy of living life. I often find myself thinking about how closely life in India is tied to nature, not in an abstract way, but in deeply practical, everyday ways. The timing of the rain determines incomes. A few degrees of temperature can decide whether crops survive. And increasingly, what used to be predictable no longer is. I come from a farming family in Uttarakhand, the foothills of the Himalayas, so this is all very personal for me. That shift from predictability to volatility is something millions of people across India are now navigating every day. And it brings us to a fundamental question. How do we build for a future where uncertainty is the norm? Because what we are seeing today is not just climate change. It is climate disruption happening faster, more frequently, and more intensely than our systems are designed to handle. In India, extreme weather events are no longer occasional shocks. They're becoming part of everyday life. And the impacts are deeply interconnected, affecting health, food systems, water, livelihoods, and economic stability all at once. For too long, the climate conversation has focused primarily on mitigation. And while that work is essential, it is no longer sufficient. Because for millions of people, especially across the global south, climate change is not a future risk. It is a present reality shaping daily life and opportunity. That is why resilience must now move to the center of how we think about development, not as a separate agenda, but as the foundation of it. At the Rockefeller Foundation, we see resilience as a systems challenge. It is about strengthening the connections between energy, health, food, and local economies so that when shocks come, they don't cascade into crisis, and solving systems challenges truly requires a different kind of an approach. First, it requires philanthropy that is catalytic. So, how we're really going to be using our resources in a way that is really going to catalyze things. Philanthropy's greatest value is not just in what it funds, but in what it unlocks. It can take risks others cannot. It can back ideas before they're proven, and it can bring together governments, markets, and communities in ways that accelerate progress. Second, it requires capital that is aligned with long-term resilience, because the scale of the climate challenge cannot be met by philanthropy alone. We need capital that is patient, that absorbs early risk, and that unlocks much larger flows of public and private investment. Take energy for an example. At the Rockefeller Foundation, we are advancing a vision of universal energy abundance, ensuring that every person has access to reliable, affordable, and sustainable electricity, not just to survive, but most importantly, to thrive. Because energy, we know, is foundational. It determines whether hospitals can function during heat waves, whether farmers can adapt to changing rainfall, whether local economies can continue to grow despite climate stress. But capital alone is not enough. This is where AI becomes transformative. At the Rockefeller Foundation, we see AI as a once-in-a-generation opportunity to accelerate progress across climate, health, and economic mobility. But only if we move beyond pilots and build systems that scale. Because today, AI is not constrained by imagination. It is constrained by infrastructure, by access to data, to compute, and to institutional capacity. And here, India offers a powerful example. We've heard that already, whether it's through digital public infrastructure, be it Aadhaar, UPI, CoWIN, India has shown that technology can be built at population scale in ways that are inclusive, reliable, and trusted. The opportunity now is to extend that model to AI, to build AI systems that are not only innovative, but trusted, inclusive, and designed for real-world challenges like climate resilience. Because in AI, trust is not an afterthought. It is what enables scale. In the context of climate, this matters enormously. AI allows us to move from reacting to crises to anticipating them, to predict extreme heat before it becomes deadly, to optimize energy systems in real time, to identify which communities are most vulnerable so that we can act early and effectively. In a country as large and diverse as India, this is truly transformative. But scaling this kind of impact requires more than technology. It requires partnership, patient capital, and institutional strength. Partnership because no single actor can solve this alone. Patient capital because real systems take time to build. Institutional strength because trust must be designed in from the very beginning. And perhaps most importantly, it requires a shift in how we work. Because climate challenge does not sit in silos. They cut across sectors, across systems, across communities, and yet too often our responses remain fragmented. What this moment demands instead is collaboration that is deeper, more connected, and grounded in real world realities. And I perfectly understand it's not easy. We're all talking about collaboration, but it is tough. Let me end with this. Resilience is not just about infrastructure. It is about people. It is about whether a farmer can adapt to a failed crop, whether a worker can continue to earn in rising heat, whether families can plan their futures despite increasing uncertainty. India stands at a pivotal moment. With its scale, its digital infrastructure, and its leadership, it has the opportunity not only to respond to climate change, but to shape how the world responds. And I remain very optimistic. If we can align philanthropy, capital, and AI, if we can build systems that are trusted, inclusive, and resilient, then we're not just adapting to the future, we're building it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Deepali. Thank you very much, Deepali, for joining us today. From ideas to implementation, our next session focuses on building climate solutions that last, from vision to scale. Our session chair is Devika Ananda, Senior Manager at SLP Sustain Labs Paris, based in UK. Over to you, Devika.
Thank you so much, Rita. Without much ado, I will jump right in. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Devika, and at Sustain Labs Paris, I work on venture building from strategy to implementation. Hope the sessions so far have left you with plenty of food for thought and more for action. Certainly, this fireside chat will inspire to act and build, because that is what our speakers for this session are best at. Also, we have an announcement for an exciting opportunity that we will share at the end of this fireside chat. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Miniya Chatterji, CEO of Sustain Labs Paris, and Rajesh Swaminthan, partner at Khosla Ventures. As CEO of Sustain Labs Paris, Miniya has been creating and building sustainable ventures across frontier innovation, education, and environment, backed by her prior experience as Chief Sustainability Officer at Jindal Steel, as being in the senior management at the World Economic Forum, and her career in investment banking at Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, HSBC, and Merrill Lynch. She is also an author. At Khosla Ventures, Rajesh is a partner, investing in company building in all areas associated with the climate sector, from industrial decarbonization to compute infrastructure. He was earlier at Applied Ventures and Bell Labs. He also holds an MBA from Harvard Business School and an engineering degree from IIT Madras. Thank you for joining us, Miniya and Rajesh, and I'm sure I'm not alone in saying that we can't wait to hear what comes out of this conversation. So let's jump right into addressing the topic for today, from vision to scale, building climate solutions that last. I'm sure the audience would love to hear where they should be spending their time ideating and building. So to the both of you, my first question is this. What are the 3 top climate themes or technologies you are most excited about as investors? Miniya, would you like to take that first?
Thank you, Devika. And that's a great question. And I'm curious to hear about Rajesh and see how our thoughts align. The last 3 years, 4 almost, have been in the Middle East, and I moved to Dubai. And I think I realized more than ever how important it is to invest in resilient food systems, water tech, and of course, decarbonization solutions like carbon capture, utilization, including direct air capture, which is still very nascent, but something that people can put their money to. But over to you, Rajesh.
Thank you. Thanks, Devika. Nice to connect, Miniya. I think I'll look at it as 3 themes, and I'll jump into some technologies. The first is, I think these days you can't start a conversation without saying AI or data center. But that's not what we are focused on. But if you look at AI and data center, there is tremendous need for energy and clean energy. So geothermal and fusion are the only 24/7 baseload power. So we are very bullish on that. Second theme I would say is kind of energy security. That's a very, very critical one. It's not just about powering the energy, but it's also things like critical minerals and even things like hydrogen, particularly for countries like India. When the war kind of a situation develops with Ukraine or Iran, you worry about the natural gas. So even our oil and gas petrochemical refining is at risk if you can't get enough natural gas into the system. So that's a big one for us. Third one, I would say, Miniya said it rightly, is like, how do you take some of the emissions from many of these industries and find something valuable out of it? So things like sustainable aviation fuels are a huge opportunity. And those are kind of the three themes, I would say, but plenty of sectors that we are investing into these days.
Thank you. Thank you both. I think from both of you, I heard the topic of uncertainty and complexity around current events coming across. Since January 2025, it's been particularly challenging for entrepreneurs building climate solutions. So I want to ask both of you this. What would your message be for them, just in terms of dealing with that uncertainty?
Happy to take this one. I would say uncertainty creates opportunity. There is a lot of uncertainty around what is happening in Iran, but uncertainty around how is AI going to affect the data centers are going to affect. There is a tremendous amount of tailwinds that come with these uncertainties. If you look at the energy stocks, they've all gone up, but what goes up comes down. But if you really look at it long term, these things can happen, these things can be repeated. So we look at how do you secure the energy in a big way, and that's where China's imposing bans on even solar panels, right? So when you think about it, every country, whether it's India or US, need to make sure we are developing our own capability in whether it's solar panels or EVs or SAFs or many of these industries. The other thing I would say is climate tech is truly global. So many of the technologies may be getting developed in US or Europe or India, but it's the way you scale is truly global. So when I look at many of our companies that develop the technology within the US, now we are actively working with many of the large conglomerates in India and a lot of partners in India to scale up these technologies. And the urgency has only increased just in the last month or two, which is, like I said, change is an opportunity. We have to ride the tailwinds and make sure these are all opportunities where we can deploy the solutions. And look for the team resiliency as well. Like, who do you add to the team? How do you build the team to buffer these kind of headwinds that come into the industry? Bring people from other sectors, not just people who have been in the R&D world, but people who have built businesses, so who understand these geopolitical risks over a period of time. So those things are all something we've been working with our companies, with our teams in a big way. So that's all being very, very helpful. On to you, Miniya.
Thank you, Rajesh. I think when there is uncertainty and dealing with ambiguity, it almost forces you to think about reinvention. It makes you think about, as Rajesh said, what are the opportunities? These are my strengths. The situation, the context has changed. How do I work this towards still coming up tops? So, I think that, and personally, that excites me a lot as well. So when there is uncertainty, things are, that's when you rethink and reconfigure almost. I think the second thing is also efficiency. When things are business as usual, there are a lot of inefficiencies with setup in organizations and even in the system as well. So during these times, as difficult as it might be, but then it does force you to kind of shake up and clean up and reduce those inefficiencies. And then I think last year and also this year with the conflict in the Middle East, it's okay to ride the wave. You don't have to. You can adjust within the system rather than changing what you're doing. So adjust within the system, because patience goes a long way in riding that wave, because things again get back as well. And certain hasty decisions or a lot of talking about the cleanup, right? A lot of people left the climate space since last year and all of that. It does clean up the system, but then also, it's okay to stay and wait and things again get back, and then you would be a reinvented version of your own self as an organization.
Thank you. So I mean, I'm hearing resilience, the importance of a resilient team, strength in dealing with that uncertainty, knowledge of what you're dealing with, and of course efficiency. All of these point to key ingredients that are required to transform a great idea into scaled implementation. But I'd love to hear more from both of you on what other key ingredients in your experience. Rajesh, you've led multiple companies to successful exits. Miniya, you've been steadfast in your commitment to sustainability, building across different ventures. Education, which is something that I personally feel is the backbone of moving forward. What other key ingredients would you advise those who have these ideas in place to take them to scaled implementation? Yeah. Rajesh?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go with it. I think the biggest ingredient for us is the size of the impact. Vinod actually wrote an article in 2020 where we said we'll only care about a dozen entrepreneurs who will change the world. By that, we meant there are only 10, 12 sectors that will really change the needle. And those are the only things that are worth working for. Otherwise, no matter how hard we work, it doesn't make an impact. It doesn't change the world in a big way. So starting with that impact matters a lot. And that impact means sectors like fusion, geothermal, cement, steel, electric vehicles, so things that move the needle for climate. So once you start there, the next critical one that we focus on is what we call it as a Chindia price. We care a lot about techno-economics. We don't do fancy spreadsheets on IRR, cash on cash, and all that stuff, and we do the seed stage, Series A, Series B investments, because those things really don't matter. What matters is whether you are developing a highly differentiated technology that's got a cost entitlement to be able to serve the markets in India and China. And that's been kind of the principal guiding mantra for us. So when I look back at the peak of climate investments in the US between 21 and 25, when all kinds of premiums and IRA taxes and tax credits were coming in, pretty much none of our investment memos had anything to do with IRA, tax credits, green premium, 45Q, 45X, all those buzzwords. Not that we were expecting a different administration that will take many of these things away, but having invested in climate, we know this thing goes up and down. So you can't depend on these green premiums when you're betting on technology and you get caught in the hype. So the techno-economics is something we care a lot about, and we religiously talk about this with all the companies that we talk to, whether they're expensive or not. This is something we literally preach and make sure founders are betting on technologies that will scale quickly and have a fundamental entitlement to lower cost. The third one, we spend a lot of time in evaluating the technologies to make sure they can be scalable, is whether many of these can integrate into existing infrastructure. By that, I mean not incremental solution that you can just slap onto existing infrastructure. We look for highly differentiated ideas, very disruptive technologies, but the opportunity to integrate and leverage existing infrastructure is super critical. And that's how you really scale a business. I'll give you an extreme example. Even when we are looking at nuclear fusion, our view was fusion is something that's an energy source, but you should be able to integrate this into a coal boiler plant. Like, how do you integrate a fusion technology as the equivalent of a coal boiler into a coal plant? By that, you are leveraging an existing infrastructure of a coal plant, all the interconnection that happens, all the turbines that exist. So that's an extreme example of how to think about integration. But there are plenty of other examples. We have a solar company that's actually working a lot with companies in India, where they're putting a perovskite on glass, and you just put the glass on the hundreds of gigawatts of solar silicon cell factories that are available there. You increase the efficiency by 30%. That's a huge delta for an efficiency improvement for minimal capex, and you integrate into existing facilities. We have a cement company that's actually can integrate into any of the cement plants. It's a highly differentiated technology. They take the CO2 coming out of the cement plant, put it back into the calcium oxide, make a cementitious material, And because you're adding CO2 back to the cement material, you're actually increasing the throughput of an existing cement plant. Now, what does that do for a factory? It increases margin because you're increasing the throughput significantly. Whereas there are other cement ideas where people have said, hey, CO2 is bad, let's go after and create new materials. Guess what? The industry doesn't adopt a completely new material just because you came up with the fancy technology. So there needs to be a much better respect for how do you integrate with existing industries and reduce the time to market and scale faster. It's not really a David versus Goliath story. It's a David and Goliath story. That's how we look at it for many of the things that we're implementing. Go ahead.
Thank you, Rajesh.
Thank you, Rajesh. So I'm going to take the position of put myself in the feet of an entrepreneur. So if I were to be building, if I have a great idea, maybe it might be useful to the audience here. If I have a great idea, how do I make sure that that vision then converts into tangible outcomes and scale? So the first thing when what I've seen is that it's the business model driving the idea. Just one great idea doesn't mean much. What's your business model which is driving that idea? How resilient is that business model? As Rajesh said, interconnectivities, how does it fit into existing structures? That's very important. So, the business model itself is extremely important when you think of a great idea. The second is the ecosystem. Especially in our field, there's, I mentioned carbon capture, for example. Many countries, they don't have the policy frameworks. I talked about resilient food systems. So novel foods, for example, they need specific certifications and all of that, right? So the ecosystem, working the ecosystem, how fickle or strong is the subsector that you're in. So these are that is very important. Even when you're expanding one geography to another geography, to choose that carefully. So the ecosystem is extremely important. Then, of course, the team. So, the team that you build around you. Rajesh mentioned this as well. Complementarity rules. If you get people who are mirror images of yourself, you're getting nowhere. To bring in people with diverse perspectives. And again, that's a challenge in our field because, and Devika, you mentioned education, right? So there are the supply of technically skilled people in this field is largely lesser than the demand for such people. So how do you hire? How do you hire people who are beyond PowerPoint presentations and who can actually roll up their sleeves? And many of these people have learned over the years because of the lack of formal education systems yet in this field. So the team is extremely important. And then finally, being nimble. And it links back to your question, Devika, about certain there's certain incidents last year and then this year with the conflicts and all of that. So these are scenarios which you have to be prepared for. So you have when you're starting an organization, you have to be prepared for that things will not always remain the same. The status quo would change. So right from the start, how do you build those systems to be nimble, keeping up the learning curve? Again, in our sector, that's very pertinent because there are always new technologies. Rajesh mentioned, for example, biofuels. There is a cement as well. It's a great example of how from a carbon intensive sector, it's moved now become mainstream to be sustainable. So there's a lot of exciting stuff happening. So keeping up the learning curve, being nimble. And I think that really comes by setting up a continuous feedback loop with the organization and the ecosystem and the market and the new technologies which are emerging. So just some practical things which make a great idea, but then how do you to tangibly be successful.
Thank you. I really enjoyed the two perspectives as an entrepreneur and as an investor. That was nice. And thank you, Rajesh, for sharing those examples as well. Miniya, you mentioned about being nimble, and Rajesh, you spoke about the need for integration into existing systems. How do you see that playing out in this the theme of the summit, which is can AI truly be net positive for the planet? Would you view AI as a friend or foe for climate entrepreneurs? And Rajesh, I'd love to hear from you first, and Miniya, I'd love to hear your views thereafter. Thank you.
Sure, happy to share our thoughts. Full disclosure, we were the first institutional investor in OpenAI in 2018, and we were also the earliest investor in Sarvam, which we are super excited about in India. So you can expect me to be biased, but I'll tell you why AI is a phenomenal friend for climate entrepreneurs. Number one, the data centers on AI are driving the biggest need for energy today and renewable energy. Whether you look at even the US, where administration appears to be against anything that's like climate positive, climate tech and so on, there is tremendous need for solar and batteries that are picking up pace here. So that's a hugely positive. The government is also hugely supportive of geothermal and fusion, because where else do you get so much energy over the next couple of decades of energy needs? So I think that's a hugely positive thing as far as the demand that AI is creating. But even more importantly, AI is also turbocharging the technology development that's happening in the climate industry. We have some phenomenal companies using AI to actually accelerate discoveries of materials around magnets, around batteries, and even around high temperature superconductors. Like, this is going at a phenomenal pace, and this is not sugarcoating AI into everything. Like, I've been a material scientist, I've been investing in deep tech for 18 years. There are a lot of combinatorial chemistry companies that have happened in the past, but that's nowhere close to the power of AI that's coming in to discover these materials. A lot more industries where AI is making an impact in climate. Even our nuclear fusion company, we have two. One is Commonwealth Fusion, the other is Rialta. Both of them are using AI to actually speed up the thousands of iterations they can do in a week, in a month, for plasma stability. Like, how do you improve the overall reaction capability, the plasma stability, and all of that stuff? And that's making a phenomenal impact on how fast they're able to advance the technology. If you look at the critical minerals, we have companies that are actually using AI to discover, to prospect, to identify the mining sites much faster. There are companies that are bringing in AI into these mining industries to move these industries significantly faster, right? And we have companies in autonomous driving. That's all related to sensor fusion and AI. So the pace with which these things are moving is just excellent. We have a AI for Grid company, company called Prabhu, based out of Stanford, that's actually working with multiple states in India to actually develop a foundational intelligence for the grid. That's a phenomenal way in which it can contribute to India. So I'm fully biased towards being positive. I don't see a downside in terms of what AI is doing for climate. You can take the argument it's creating a lot of energy needs, like where does energy come from? It's energy consumption, water consumption. That's all absolutely true. But that's what is creating the opportunity for the energy security and investments into these energy sectors much faster, which otherwise would have fallen behind. Go ahead.
Okay, that's a very provocative question, Devika, and great to hear from you, Rajesh, about all the great work investments that you've made in the sector. So I'm very bullish as well. So, especially in the field of R&D. So, the acceleration in R&D because of AI is phenomenal. In material sciences, for example, AI can just screen millions of structures, molecular structures, to find new battery chemistries, and at a huge discount, about 10 to 20% of the traditional cost. And then again, operational efficiency as well. There are startups and various new technologies that use AI to reduce building HVAC emissions and to slash them down by about 40-50%. So these are, I think, massive benefits which we could have never done manually ourselves. So there's also lots of examples for grid optimization. For example, you have companies such as Dexter Energy, and they use ML to forecast renewable energy supply and demand, as Rajesh said. That there is a lot of linkages with renewable energy as well. Now, however, of course, the elephant in the room is that data center electricity use is projected to triple by 2030. So that is something which a lot of people are working on. You can't deny it; it is there. And then I also, to that, wanted to add that, of course, AI to the common user is a great asset as an analytical engine that compresses a lot of research. But I think in our field, it is not there yet, because I think AI needs to evolve more and become more mature to be able to be a reliable tool for research in our field.
Thank you so much. Really insightful. We do have a question around AI from the audience. Aresha asks, do investors risk limiting bold innovation in AI, and how do you strike the right balance? Either of you, Rajesh, would you like to go first?
I think we're taking enough risk in both AI and climate. We put a large check in OpenAI, like I said, 2018. We are investing significantly in AI. We are investing in AI and material science and all of that stuff. We are not shying away from taking risks in climate investments as well. So we're not trying to balance both. I mean, interestingly, we incubated and invested in Commonwealth Fusion, which is the highest risk investment you can make, because nuclear fusion, nobody wanted to touch it 7-8 years ago. It's roughly around the same month we decided to invest in OpenAI as well. So it's interesting to see both of these are coming together. I do think both of these will be trillion-dollar companies. The timing may be a little bit apart in terms of when these get to. It just shows where AI is, where energy is. But the end game, in terms of the impact they both have, is just phenomenal. So we will continue to take high-risk investments in both those sectors because the world demands it.
Thank you, Rajesh. I do understand there's a paucity of time, and I want to end on an optimistic note and also address Ash's question from the audience about climate ventures in the global south and how backing them is different. But in relation to that, I'd love to ask another question, which is that there are investors in the diaspora interested in investing in climate solutions. But this is very fragmented. It's been quite fragmented so far. So how can they collaborate? If you could each just take a few seconds to summarize your final thoughts and also answer that question, it would be much appreciated.
Go ahead, Miniya.
Okay. So I really like that question, by the way, about the climate ventures in developing economies, because the problems are quite different, in developing economies. And oftentimes, climate and environment-related problems are married to a lot of social and equity-related issues as well. So, so that's why the solutions need to be different too. So it's a great question. I think that, we in the last few years, it's been amazing to see that there have been homegrown developing country-based investors and also climate philanthropy. Climate philanthropy, for example, in India, it's great to see that how it has flourished. So I think that ecosystem is coming up. But then I'll again go back to the supply of people who are making these. And again, as you can see, I'm very passionate about that, about upskilling people on building the right technical skills rather than PowerPoint and compliance and all of that. So I think that needs to be worked on more for young people and people, to be able to come up with solutions which matter, which work, which can scale. So that's one piece. And then coming to your question, I think, absolutely, Devika, it's a great question that there are investors in climate, serious investors. After last year, I think a lot of people have moved, sorry, Rajesh, to AI from the climate sector. And the ones who stayed are probably very serious. And there is a need for sharing of experiences and definitely sharing of technical expertise as well. Because the climate sector is very cross-sectoral, and every time it crosses with specific sectors and even geographies, it demands new versions of itself. So I think having a platform, and maybe Amita can help us create that across the diaspora, where investors can speak to each other, share expertise, what they are seeing, and then also I think it will lead to risk reduction and definitely scalability as well, and just identification of people who people who are doing good stuff and need that bit of support.
Yeah, I agree, and I see climate companies growing really well both in the US and in India. I see more of innovations, early stage, high risk technologies getting developed in the US, fundamentally because the US has spent a lot of money in that area. There is a lot of research work there. And India has historically been more focused on the IT side of things, so not like fundamental science that got developed, but that's changing quite a bit. I'm very happy to see that in terms of how India is investing. Just like India kind of overshot the Western world with both in fintech, with what Aadhaar and other things have done, as well as in telecom. The mobile adoption happened pretty quickly compared to a lot of the Western countries. I do think India has a huge role to play in the energy as well. So a lot of the technologies we're developing in the US have the ability to scale faster actually in India. So I'm certainly looking forward to building that bridge and making that connection happen. And it's more opportunistic when I meet with Indian investors who are interested in climate. So there is a better forum where we can all engage and discuss like how do we build this, how do we bridge these technologies and scale up what is so critical for India and what is truly critical for the world. Climate is a global problem. See, carbon emissions is everywhere. So it doesn't matter where you build this and capture it and address it, we have to build it everywhere. So there is tremendous opportunity for how we should be doing this better and remove the inefficiency and the friction.
Thank you so much, Miniya. Thank you so much, Rajesh. This was really insightful. I'm sure it's left the audience with plenty to think about, as was promised, and plenty to act upon. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the audience for listening. And on that note of collaboration, Miniya, I just want to thank you very much for the opportunity that funds outstanding women leaders across the Indian diaspora who are combating climate change through the Indiaspora Women in Climate Scholarship. Would you like to say a few words?
Yes, sure. So, you would have figured in the last 25 minutes that I'm very invested in climate education. And one of the things that I feel personally very grateful for was the opportunity to create India's first university level program, a BTech in climate change. India needs 100 more, but at least I feel I've at least created the first, which can then be multiplied. And on that note, what we also do is that we work with climate leaders so that there is a snowballing effect of what they learn with us and then go back into their organizations and take those learnings forward. And it also, it gets them to meet with more people globally, and some of the things that you talked about, Devika and Rajesh, those collaborations then get catalyzed. So very happy to announce the Indiaspora Women in Climate Scholarship, so which grants 100% tuition waiver for the SLP Climate Leadership Certificate to support outstanding women leaders in the diaspora who are doing their bit for climate change. So you have the QR code here. Amita's going to send you this as well to all the audience. And feel free, of course, to reach out if you have any questions. Thank you, Devika.
Thank you, Devika. Thank you, Miniya. I'll invite Preeta.
Thank you. And thank you for the announcement on the scholarship. From rising temperatures to shifting ecosystems, the urgency of climate action cannot be ignored. I would now like to invite Mridula Ramesh, award-winning author and founder of the Sundaram Climate Institute and an investor in climate tech startups in India. Welcome, Mridula.
Okay. Thank you, Preeta. Thank you to the Indiaspora team for inviting me. I'd like to start with something that's going on right now. When the Strait of Hormuz shuts, the world stops. And that brings up the concept of a choke point or a bottleneck. Anyone who's done an MBA will remember Herbie from their operations class. Choke points or bottlenecks are basically, processes that limit the speed at which an overall process moves. And when they're closed, they prevent action. What's really interesting is climate action has choke points too. But because they're dispersed, when one blocks up, it's not as immediately dramatic as Hormuz. These dispersed choke points hide inside muddied incentives within how things are procured, in how subsidies flow, and sometimes in inaccessible satellite imagery. And when they close, they prevent or delay climate action, meaning the world dies from 1,000 paper cuts. For India especially, that's a problem. Let's be clear, the climate has changed. And for those who don't believe me, there is an El Nino, super El Nino in the works, looks like this year. So we can talk again at the end of the year to show you exactly how the climate has changed. And India is one of the most vulnerable countries to this warming climate, needs to focus more, as even one earlier speaker said, on adaptation. The tragedy is India has made significant and meaningful strides in mitigation, that is getting at the carbon intensity of its GDP down. But its strides that it's taken in adaptation have been far patchier. And why is that? The constraint is not a lack of solutions or a shortage of ideas. Look, I've spent the last 10 years investing in some of these adaptation-based solutions. So they exist, and there are hundreds more waiting in the wings. But what's preventing from a climate adaptation startup from scaling as fast as, say, a solar power producer? I would argue it's a shortage of a clear signal. And that's where AI can matter. Some say, look, we already have ML, we have data systems, what can AI add? 4 things. First, it's granularity at the scale at which warnings actually matter. A legacy data system would tell you, look, there's 250 millimeters of rainfall, for example, that fell over Mumbai on August 21st last year. It can say, look, on average, a meter of rainfall fell in August over the last 10 years. That's historically interesting, but operationally completely useless. What saves lives is knowing where and when 450 millimeters of rainfall will fall in the next 24 hours. AI models, climate models operating at local scale, where they combine satellite data, historical rainfall data, terrain, drainage, real-time feeds, can provide the kind of warning that tells you where exactly storm drains need to be in pristine condition and which streets the people need to be evacuated. Efforts that are so targeted that action becomes less expensive, and that means they actually happen. The second way in which AI can help is timing. Existing records can show a farmer what and when you sowed last year or in the last 10 years. But AI can tell you what and when to sow this year, combining insights from disparate models like soil moisture, forecasted rainfall, how mandi prices will behave. For example, if fertilizer is going to be short and everybody in your vicinity is planting rice, are you better off going for planting millet? And oh, by the way, here are 3 procurement agencies and the numbers you can contact. And by the way, would you like me to draft an email or a WhatsApp message for that? The difference between a historical record and a decision support system is the difference between a mirror and a map. Third, this again, other people have brought up, synthesis across systems, right? The kind of problems, the wicked climate, especially adaptation problems, like stubble burning, water depletion, how do we deal with crop stress, the data for these live across different systems that don't talk to each other. AI, the ability of AI to read across these systems simultaneously and find the pattern is really, really useful and fill in the gaps intelligently. Well, not always intelligently, but for the most part, to help make better decisions. And lastly, this is probably the most important. AI can help political leaders and investors understand where exactly to deploy political and financial capital. Look, there's no use pretending that a lot of these adaptation solutions do require political capital to be spent. And that's not infinite. So AI can take that data and say, look, which fight is actually winnable, in which district at which moment. And that's a question of signal. And today, a lot of political leaders are operating on somewhat of a weak signal, aggregate statistics, anecdotal reports, and intuition. And that's where AI can make a difference. Let me sort of look at, 1 or 2 examples, depending on time, to show you what I mean. One thing, a wicked problem is stubble burning, right? Every October to November, the satellite images, the firm's data from NASA shows this bright red wash in the northwest of India. The op-eds come alive. There's the same almost tired, predictable measures to try and counteract the pollution, while the air remains solid gray. The problem is we're treating this as an enforcement problem. Farmers are burning illegally, so stop them. But what if this is an incentive problem? The farmer who's burning is making a perfectly rational decision. The relevant data is sitting in silos. Satellite data that shows who's burning, subsidy records that show who's getting free fertilizer and free electricity, procurement data that shows which farmers are selling to FCI through which mandi at what price, soil health cards that show you where the soil is depleted, data sitting in these little cooperatives showing you where is the machinery really required and where it's not enough. Machinery like happy seeders, right, which help farmers sow through the stubble, so they don't have to clear the stubble to plant the wheat crop. But none of these talk to each other, right? And they're all sitting hidden somewhere. But if you connect them and say, look, this farmer has been burning for 3 years running. He looks like he's setting his field on fire again, but he's continuing to receive these subsidies and he sells via this mandi to the FCI at this price. His neighbor has stopped burning this year, but he can't rent this happy seeder because it's not available in his village, right? There's a farmer in UP who's not burnt at all, who's doing everything that he's asked, but his grain is not procured. You've changed the conversation immediately. You've stopped designing punishments for the symptom and you've started designing incentives. You've started designing interventions to change the incentives. You've started, this kind of decision helps you decide who to buy from, linking subsidies to good behavior, directing missionary hiring online to high burn clusters, directing political capital, and that's required, to exactly where it's needed the most. You think the intervention, think needle, not sledgehammer. And that makes action actually possible. Guys, do I have time to run through another example or should we close?
You can, Mridula, because this is your time.
Okay. The second example, and this is a startup I've invested in, it has to do with sugarcane. Like sugarcane has an unsavory reputation, period. It's thought of as a water guzzler that destroys the climate resilience of a region. But here's something most people don't get. Sugarcane can cope with extra water, but it doesn't need it. It's a flood-resistant crop. It's not a water-hungry crop. But when water is effectively free in Indian agriculture, the rational decision is to overuse it, right? And it has consequences like soil degrades, you deplete all the water table, and importantly, you generate a lot more methane from the flooded fields. But here's the killer. It reduces the yield of the sugarcane. So there is a company, Cultivate, which I've invested in, which has shown at scale that by placing soil, these moisture sensors and using a little bit of AI to understand how to operate the irrigation pump sets that give the plant only what it wants at the time it wants it, the farmer can simultaneously increase his yield while dramatically cutting the water consumption. And this has been shown at scale. You would think it's an easy sell, right? But it's not. The startup is struggling to scale because water is free. So the saving is invisible to the farmer. So he has to the startup markets it as a labor selling innovation. And that's a much harder sell. And farmers tend to be wary because what if this new contraption makes their crops wither because it's cutting down water so much? The only way this can scale, in my opinion, is if we make water valuable. And that's not by pricing water, because I don't think that's going to happen. The solution is to generate carbon credits, right? Because when you cut down the water, you're cutting down the methane, and that should give rise to you're saving carbon. So we should open the door to carbon credits. But here's the bottleneck. Securing carbon credit means verification. It needs high quality data. It needs continuous online data in a manner that suits the auditors, verifiers, etc., and gets a buyer to bite. So by connecting the sensor data to satellite moisture data, mandi records, and calculations of how methane is reduced in an online fashion, this is turning this disparate data into output that a buyer can trust and a bank can finance. The startup that I refer to is trying to do this, and hopefully it will work. Look, to sum up, India's solution is not ideas. Ideas exist. People understand the context in which it's located, etc. It's very different, as others have mentioned, from the West. The problem is these hundreds of little bottlenecks that are scattered across these systems. And if we can use AI, right, to identify these bottlenecks and unblock them at source and stop wasting resources trying to treat the symptom, we can really make significant progress, and AI can help. And as many have said, let's not greenwash over AI's energy requirement or water requirement. This is really a big deal. So for the startups that I look to invest in, I'm like, don't put AI first. If you're using AI intelligently to uncover bottlenecks, material science, of course, as the previous speaker said, is a huge opportunity. But use AI selectively because it can add real value, but only when it's used properly. Thank you.
Mridula, thank you so much. Can you take one question, please?
Sure.
Okay. So the question is, when you say there's a shortage of clear climate signals in India, is the gap more about data availability, datation, and where can AI intervene most effectively?
So the issue is really, there's a shortage of both political capital and financial capital, right? So for instance, let me get back to that Bombay example or Chennai because I understand it better. If you say, look, there is this northeast monsoon is coming, so Chennai is going to get flooded. Let's just clear everything and clear all the encroachments, etc. It's not going to happen. Okay, it's just going to remain on paper. But if we can use AI and say, look, these two streets are the real bottleneck, right? This particular drain and this encroachment feeding this lake, this tiny stretch of 10 meters is where you need to get the encroachments out. It's 2 huts. It's not a neighborhood, right? Once you pinpoint it, which you can do, that's when, you're now going with a needle. You're not going with a sledgehammer. And that the political capital required to remove 2 huts, and you can do it very humanely because resettling 2 huts is very different from resettling a neighborhood. Sometimes you have to resettle a neighborhood, but not all the time.
Thank you. And I think the same person had a corollary to their question. And if AI is helping us detect weak climate signals, how do we ensure those signals actually translate into timely action rather than just better predictions?
Awesome. Well, I mean, to some extent, India is already doing it, right? I was in Odisha just now, and Odisha, without AI, in 1999, they got decimated by a cyclone. And the geography of Odisha is such that every cyclone will, it's a very high, it's a cyclone hotspot. And through earlier prediction, you don't need predictions 6 months out. What you need is good predictions 3 days out, 2 days out, and then coordination with the disaster prevention agencies, state agencies, etc. And what, to me, always, you focus on the bottleneck, and this is something I learned from manufacturing, that it just unblocks the system. And we spend far too much time treating the symptom and not the cause. And I think AI can help unpack the causes in the examples I gave.
Thank you so much. I'll turn it over to my colleague, Preeta.
We will now have our India CEO, Shri Nair, delivering the concluding remarks.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? See me?
We can hear you, Shri, and we can see you too.
Wonderful. Thank you, Preeta. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Shri Nair. I'm the CEO for India and Senior Vice President for Globalist based out of New Delhi. Some terrific sessions, keynotes this morning, and the speakers were phenomenal with their understanding of the subject, analysis, observations, recommendations, and a big thank you to all of you. There are about 10 points which I have noted down while I was listening through the entire 2-hour session, and I'm going to list them and or rather give them list them from 1 to 10 so that you can take note. I might have missed out a few points, but I'm sure somewhere my team would help me with whatever I would have missed. First is that AI's climate promise is real, but only if deployed responsibly, efficiently, and with clear sustainability metrics. Second, the conversation must shift from AI first to impact first and solving real climate bottlenecks at scale. Third, collaboration across policy, enterprise, research, and philanthropy is no longer optional, but it is essential. Fourth is affordable AI training, including specific skills, will remain an important aspect across several industry sectors focused on sustainability/green. Fifth, as AI adoption accelerates, the rapid expansion of data centers, especially in India and globally, will make energy efficiency, renewable integration, and sustainable infrastructure critical to ensuring AI's net positive climate impact. Energy efficiency in AI systems will define whether AI becomes a climate solution or a climate burden. Sixth, emerging innovations from neuromorphic computing, which was a great presentation, I thought, to climate-focused capital offer strong pathways forward, and one must be able to leverage on the existing infrastructure while scaling. Seventh is inclusion equity, including empowering women leaders in climate, must remain central to progress. We saw that scholarship presentation. Eighth was the global Indian diaspora has a unique role to bridge ideas, capital, and actions across geographies. Ninth, urgency is clear. We must move the dialogue to measurable, time-bound outcomes. And lastly, the question is no longer can AI be net positive, but how fast we can make it so. And let this summit be a catalyst, not a conclusion, for sustained climate action powered by responsible AI. I was just reflecting on these discussions and cannot help but think about generations that will inherit the consequences of whatever actions we or the inaction on the climate change. And the future will be shaped by policies we choose today, and I'm hopeful that they will build on this foundation with a stronger, more adaptive mitigation frameworks that prioritize sustainability, resilience, and equity. As an organization, I believe that Indiaspora must and will continue to play a proactive and consistent role, convening thought leaders, driving cross-border collaboration, and championing practical solutions so that we'll address the planet's climate changes and challenges, not intermittently, but with sustainable committee and urgency. Once again, thank you, everyone, participants, my entire team who put this together. Wishing all of you a good and productive weekend. Take care. All the best. Bye.